When Gloria Ramirez was rushed into a California emergency room, no one expected what would happen next. Doctors and nurses began to faint. One stopped breathing. Another was paralyzed. But Gloria, she just lay there dying. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened, but the theories are disturbing. In this story, we'll explore the baffling case of Gloria Ramirez, the so-called toxic woman. A case that shut down an emergency room, sent medical personnel to intensive care, and left investigators torn between science and the unknown. Was it a rare chemical reaction? A cover-up involving secret drug labs? Or something far darker and still unsolved? It was just after 8 p.m. when 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez was brought into the ER. She was barely conscious, confused, her heart racing out of control. Paramedics had found her at home in a state of extreme distress. Breathing heavily, her speech slurred. She had late-stage cervical cancer, and this seemed like a medical emergency. Nothing more. Doctors and nurses began standard procedures. 4 lines, heart monitor, sedatives. But then, something strange happened. One nurse noticed an odd, oily sheen covering Gloria's skin. Another said she smelled something, a garlicky, fruity odor, coming from Gloria's mouth. That's when the first collapse happened. Nurse Susan Kane, drawing blood from Gloria's arm, noticed that her blood had a strange, ammonia-like odor. She also saw manila-colored particles floating in it, something no one could explain. Moments later, Kane collapsed to the floor. Within minutes, 5 more medical personnel dropped, fainting, gasping, some temporarily paralyzed. The ER was evacuated. The hospital declared a level 3 hazard. Doctors in hazmat suits tried to stabilize the scene. But Gloria, she died 45 minutes after arriving. And that's when the real mystery began. The county coroner ordered an autopsy, but because of the bizarre contamination, it had to be performed in a sealed isolation chamber. Doctors wore full biohazard gear. The room was scrubbed with chlorine and ozone. Even then, some investigators fell ill. What could have made this woman so dangerous, even in death? A team from the California Department of Health launched an official investigation. They interviewed 34 hospital staff. 23 had developed symptoms: dizziness, shortness of breath, even tremors and convulsions. But oddly, the most affected staff were all women. The men in the room, mostly unaffected, that raised eyebrows. Their conclusion? Mass psychogenic illness, in other words, mass hysteria. They claimed that after the first nurse collapsed, others followed due to panic, not poison. But that didn't sit right with everyone, especially when you remember one nurse spent 2 weeks in intensive care, and another developed hepatitis and bone necrosis. So the mass hysteria theory sounded convenient, but it didn't explain the ammonia smell, the oily skin, the floating particles in her blood, or why trained ER staff used to emergencies dropped like flies. That's when the theories started rolling in. After Gloria Ramirez died and the hospital chaos ended, investigators were left with a question no one could answer. What turned a dying woman into a biohazard? The autopsy offered no smoking gun, so scientists turned to theories. 3 of them still dominate the debate today, each more unsettling than the last. The most accepted theory, at least by official agencies, centers around a chemical called dimethyl sulfoxide, or DMSO. It's a solvent sometimes used as a home remedy for pain. Gloria had terminal cancer, and some believe she was applying DMSO to her skin to ease her symptoms. DMSO is generally harmless when used topically, but the theory goes that when hospital staff administered oxygen to Gloria, the extra oxygen combined with the DMSO on her body. This may have converted the chemical into something deadly. Dimethyl sulfate, a toxic gas used in warfare. Dimethyl sulfate can damage the heart, liver, and lungs, and it can cause paralysis, coma, and death. Symptoms that matched exactly what the medical staff experienced. But there's one problem. No one ever found traces of dimethyl sulfate in Gloria's body. Not a molecule, Still, the CDC and other health officials stuck with the DMSO explanation. It was simple, it was clean, closed the case. But many in the medical field weren't convinced. If DMSO turned to gas, why had no one ever seen this kind of reaction before or since? This brings us to the second theory. Another theory comes from the Riverside police themselves, but it wasn't shared widely. Some insiders speculated that Gloria's symptoms and the hospital chaos were due to exposure to chemicals used in methamphetamine production. There were rumors that Gloria's neighborhood had an underground meth operation, one that used toxic solvents. The idea? Gloria, unknowingly or not, may have been exposed to or even ingested dangerous byproducts. When doctors tried to save her, they aerosolized it into the air. Sounds dramatic, but meth labs produce compounds like phosphine gas and hydrogen chloride, both of which can cause rapid onset of symptoms, including those suffered by hospital staff. But again, the theory falls short. No chemical residue was ever found on her body or clothes. And there's another issue. How would Gloria, a struggling cancer patient and mother of two, have come into contact with high-grade chemical waste? If this was meth contamination, it raises a bigger question. Was she the victim of something criminal? This brings us to the next theory. Now we come to the most controversial theory, one rarely spoken about in official circles. Some believe Gloria Ramirez wasn't just sick. She was exposed to something experimental and dangerous, something the government didn't want anyone to know about. A Riverside ER nurse anonymously told reporters she believed Ramirez was part of a covert medical trial gone wrong. Some reports even suggest she was injected with a secret treatment for cancer, one involving experimental chemicals used by the Department of Defense. Wild? Maybe, but not impossible. In the 1990s, the U.S. military was known to test unapproved chemical agents on soldiers and terminally ill patients. Some believe Ramirez may have been part of a treatment trial she never truly understood. If true, it would explain the hospital's rushed evacuation, the hazmat suits, the lack of a proper investigation. But this theory remains purely circumstantial. No hard evidence has ever emerged. Just fear and questions. So what really happened to Gloria Ramirez? Was it science gone wrong? A chemical fluke? A cover-up? Each theory gives us a piece of the puzzle, but none complete it. And what's more chilling is this: nothing like it has ever happened again. After the chaos subsided, and Gloria Ramirez was buried, a strange silence followed. There were no criminal charges, no lawsuits, no resignations, just a quiet acceptance of the DMSO theory and a quiet dismissal of the deeper questions. But for her family, the silence was unbearable. Her family never accepted the official story. Her sister told local reporters she wasn't some toxic accident. She was a person, a mother, and now she's a mystery no one wants to solve. They believe Gloria was unfairly blamed for her own death, as if she caused the collapse of the ER just by existing. They wanted answers, but by then, most doors had already closed. The hospital quietly resumed operations. The coroner filed the report. The media cycle moved on, and Gloria's name faded from headlines, except in conspiracy forums and whispered case studies. Yet even in scientific circles, the case refused to die. In medical schools, students now study the toxic woman as a cautionary tale, a case where nothing made sense. Doctors debate whether it was chemical exposure, mass hysteria, or a systemic failure of imagination. One researcher from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory said privately, "We may never know what really happened, but the scariest part is, it could happen again." That's the truth few want to admit. The unknown still lingers. The most heartbreaking aspect of the story isn't just the theories. It's Gloria herself. In all the chaos, it's easy to forget that she was a real person. A 31-year-old woman trying to survive cancer. A mother of two who was known for her warmth and kindness. Her life was reduced to a headline, a punchline in medical journals. But behind the mystery, there was a tragedy. Gloria died without dignity, shrouded in confusion, and the people around her nearly lost their lives trying to save her. So what can we believe? The DMSO theory, while plausible, leaves too many questions unanswered. The meth lab contamination theory? No solid proof. The government cover-up? Tempting but speculative. All we're left with is mystery. But perhaps that's what makes this story so haunting. It isn't just a mystery of science. It's a mystery of humanity. What happens when science meets the unexplained? When knowledge fails, and all we have left is belief? Today, the story of Gloria Ramirez lives on in whispers, in textbooks, true crime podcasts, and the haunted memories of those who were there. Maybe the truth is hidden, or maybe it's just too dangerous to say out loud.